It really started off as that 12-year-old kid in the ditches, digging up
Mhm.
roots and rocks, all the way up to working for a multi-billion dollar life science company.
This is Facility Rockstars, the podcast that celebrates the unsung heroes of our daily lives, facility professionals. I'm your host, Jay Culbert. Join me as we honor these great leaders, sharing stories, insights, and expertise that empower us all to learn and grow together. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Coludus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier.
Welcome back to Facility Rockstars. I'm your host, Jay Culbert. Today's guest is an experienced facilities and property management professional with more than 15 years of success managing complex operations across biotech, life sciences, and commercial environments. Known for his hands-on leadership style and a deep commitment to operational excellence, he has built his career around optimizing facilities, strengthening vendor partnerships, and creating efficient, high-performing workspaces. His expertise spans everything from day-to-day facilities management to strategic planning and process improvement, ensuring every space he oversees supports both productivity and innovation. He was most recently the facility manager at Sage Therapeutics. Derek Bettencourt, welcome to the show.
Jay, how you doing today, brother?
Couldn't be better. Thank you for being here.
I have to just say, I don't know if anyone's ever made me sound so good in my 34 years, my friend. I don't
Hey,
even know. I'm like, who's he talking to?
it's your story, man. You earned every bit of it.
Thank you for having me, brother.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we'll jump right in, right? So with everything I just said, 15 years, biotech, commercial, properties, what's been your biggest lesson learned throughout that time?
So I've been fortunate enough to wear most hats when it comes to the facilities game. I've been everywhere from lead engineer of a large building all the way down to the technician working down in the basement. And I think wearing every hat has really given me some perspective in life that, really has given me opportunities to cherish the good, weighing through the bad. Um, and I just want to say that it's been the 15 years has been a great opportunity to really step back and just count the wins when you get them. Not every single day, for all our facility friends out there, not every single day is a slam dunk, is a home run. And I think the biggest thing is just getting up every morning and willing to fight the battle. Some days are going to be easier than others. Some days they're going to, be a little bit more clear, defined what you need to do. Some days you're going to be walking out of there scratching your head saying, what just happened the last 10 hours? But to be able to be in every asset to every facet of the game, I think has been probably my biggest takeaway from the 15 years is that just it's all about the grind. You got to wake up the next day. You got to keep grinding. Some days are going to be that win. Some days you might take the loss. Some days you might not know what happened, but it's just about, not how many times you get knocked down. It's how many times you get back up. That's a huge part of the facilities game.
It's great. It's great. I like you shared that you shared that you wore all those hats. Now, could you talk about that a little bit more and how or did it help you to reflect back when you had that other hat on and now you're working with a colleague or someone who reports to you or works alongside you? How did that work? How did that help you?
Absolutely. So, in full transparency, I'm one of the fortunate enough uh, children of a small business owner. And if you've been the prodigal son of a small business owner, you probably know exactly what I'm about to spell out for you. But my father, God bless him, owns a irrigation company, veteran irrigation, works all throughout the North Shore. And I've been following. It's funny, I call him Dad, but on the job site he's Donnie B. So I've been following Donnie B around since probably 2004. At 12 years old, don't tell OSHA, with a bucket and a shovel, grabbing all the rocks out of the ditch witch line. And started with my father, following him around, as the grunt, the whole digger, showing up to all these beautiful $1 million estates all throughout the North Shore and just slaving away in the front yard, digging out rocks and roots and whatever else is in your way, all the way up to actually getting recognized by some of the customers in the Cape Ann area, which actually transitioned me to directly working for some of those customers in the Cape Ann area. And, doing a little bit more of their general housekeeping, full landscaping, their irrigation, but also some indoor, outdoor work, some carpentry, some lighting, which, provided me a bunch of skills that led my cousin who worked in Cambridge at the time to say, hey, you're somebody, you're becoming a real asset. And I feel like we can further develop you. And, taking what I've learned and bringing it into Cambridge, which got me into the biotech and life science facility, and then gradually climbing through that ladder, becoming a little bit more mechanical and automation based, finally getting recognized from a tenant, which was Sage Therapeutics, which is where I ended up spending the last 6 years of my professional career. And now the reason I lay all that out is because it really started off as that 12-year-old kid in the ditches, digging up
Mhm.
roots and rocks, all the way up to working for a multi-billion-dollar life science company. And it's just taught me to appreciate every level of the game. So that when a vendor shows up or a technician shows up, I've been in their shoes. I can relate. And I always think there's this little bit of a misunderstanding sometimes between the customer and the vendor. And why didn't this happen? I thought it was going to be easy. You said it would be quick. And I've always been able to bridge those two worlds together, being in every position of the game. And I honestly think that's been my biggest strength in life, is just having worn so many hats. It doesn't matter if I'm the customer or in the multi-million-dollar state, or if I'm the ditch digger out in their front yard. I've been both and can relate to both and can help the two parties come together and understand each other a little bit better.
So love the story first off, because Donnie B taught you how to pick rocks and roots out of a Ditch Witch trench.
Shout out
I've
Donnie B.
that's that is not a that's not a fun job, and you literally learned it from the ditches all the way up. So I like that you mentioned appreciation and bringing people together in the sum total of the story here. At least that's what I'm hearing from you, Derek. Um, can you give us an example of, like, what you also mentioned when the customer said, "Oh, I thought this was going to be easy or quick or less disruptive," whatever the case was. Give us a couple of examples where either that appreciation or maybe even empathy or bringing people together served you and the client well, or your team well.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's face it, uh, once again, shout out Donnie B. He had a famous saying that was, well, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. And we know that, some things maybe are a little bit deeper or need a little bit more of a finer point touch than what's originally anticipated. And there's just always been a situation where, if we want to go with the irrigation one, hey, spring, turning on the system, I got a plow guy, gets crazy in those nor'easter whiteout situations, and he hit a few sprinklers. Should be a nice, quick, easy fix, though. Absolutely, we'll be right over. And as you show up, you realize actually what he did was rip out a whole zone by catching the plow blade at the end of the line and sucking everything out, 6 heads deep through the yard with crimped and smashed pipe. And now you're replacing what you thought was one or two sprinklers heads, might be a whole zone. And it's just one of those situations where if you can go up to the customer, show them exactly what you're talking about, really just explain it to them black and white. This is what we have going on. Yeah, there's always going to be some initial frustrations, but when you've done good work with them in the past, they're going to feel like they're in good hands.
Mhm.
And you just go ahead, you make the repair as quick and painless as possible. And, you're always going to be the guy they call back on. Same with corporate America. Let's say that we have a few executive assistants in HR, and they're planning this big holiday fundraiser. And they're just getting some blankets and some kits delivered, and we're going to build them for the homeless and the needy. And it's going to be super quick and super simple. But the delivery driver shows up and he doesn't speak English, and he doesn't have a cart, and he doesn't have a dolly, and what he does have doesn't fit in the elevator. So now it's getting carried up 8 flights of stairs, and the kits weren't as assembled. So now you're running through the office, rallying other people to come help out and give a hand. It's the same exact method that I was using on the sprinkler site, where it's just being there time after time, being in the trenches with these people, and just having them know that you're the guy that's going to make it happen. Even if you do run into those headaches, they say, well, this is a little painful, but Derek's on it. And it's just that repeated every single day, knocking it out of the park or taking the loss, but coming back the next day to, fight that battle again. Where, yeah, if you do run into a headache, or a customer that thought it was going to be easy and it turns out it's not so easy, they'll at least give you the grace to do what you need to do so that they're put in the best position to succeed.
Yeah, and it sounds like they have the confidence because you have the ability to give them the confidence that, look, it's going to be okay. I'm going to get this done for you. And I think that's probably what matters at the end of the day, whether it's a residential sprinkler system, right, like you said, or something more major in a major facility. Speaking of which, I think you mentioned briefly, we talked, I think last week, about trying to find a pinhole in a sprinkler system, and it was a much larger undertaking than what you expected. And I think this story, if I'm remembering this correctly, Derek, the story is probably going to land for a lot of our listeners right now. Do you mind sharing or expanding there?
So the caveat is, don't do sprinkler work in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We can just get back to the work. Jay, so prior to working at Sage, I was the engineer for the property is 215 First Street in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's the Athenaeum building. It's a beautiful building. It used to be an old printing press. And what was cool about the building is it actually has been built over time. The original part of the building actually had a train station stop at the end of it, and a train used to run through the middle of the building to make its deliveries. And just over the 130 years, they've just built this building into a massive, 400,000 square foot life science facility. Great
It
property.
is a very cool building. Yeah, I know the building. Yeah, it's very nice.
So, but do you know the backside of it? And how,
I do not.
Go figure, Jay, when you take things that are built in the 1800s and you attach them to things built in the 2000s, sometimes those things don't coincide so well. But we had a pinhole leak on the second floor, and it was right in the heart of the building, right in the middle. So the problem with the heart of the building is it's one of the newer aspects of the property. So when you're trying to find exactly what controls that sprinkler system, well, is it the D building? Is it the E building? Is it the F building? Where is this actually coming from? So we went ahead and we drained the entire D building, the entire E building, and the entire F building, 6 stories of building to work on this one small pinhole leak. We had Cambridge Fire on standby. Building was on bypass. Alarms were down. We took all precautions that we could just to get into this thing. And once we actually start the repair, the technician goes, I'm not too sure, but this still feels like it's under pressure. And, my boss at the time says, well, is it under pressure because there's 6 stories of building backing it? Or is it under pressure because the street's going to start, going? So there's only one way to find out. Apparently, at the time, there was only one way to find out. And the best thing to do was to take a coupling, loosen it up a little bit, and try to do a nice slow drain. We had a ditch that we drained all the building into with a handful of float pumps, and they would pump it out into a drain. I mean, everything in this building was bubble gum and Band-Aids, but, when you walk in on the first day, you just get handed a building, you say, do your best. You got to do your best. So We got our 3 buildings drained. We got fire department on standby. We got 4, engineers ready to go to see whatever's going to happen, start the cleanup process. We knock off the coupling, and then 150 PSI starts blasting through that thing like there's no tomorrow. And the room slowly starts to fill with water. And that water trickles down the hallway, into
Ouch.
the basement, into the men's locker room, into the women's locker room. And next thing you know, you're standing in about 10 inches of water. And clearly, this thing is not stopping anytime soon. So we run down to the fire control room, take off the fire pump because that thing's just chugging along. And then we just start going to every other shut off in the building. And of course, again, 1800s building, some are in tenant spaces, locked behind, closets, and you're trying to get their supply key to open the door. And eventually, I think after the 3rd or 4th additional shut off, we find it on the exact opposite side of the building. And it turns out it was cross-bred from an entirely different part of the street. So we're here on First Street where we think everything's coming in through the main. And actually, no, it's the back door a block away on the opposite side of the building where everything's been coming in live street pressure. And after about 45 minutes of nonstop running, we finally got the thing killed, but we're in a swimming pool now in our basement. And that ended up being a fun 40, 50-hour cleanup between Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Oh,
And yeah, it was awesome about it too, was that was my first overtime on the job. I started January 2016, and this catastrophe happened in March or April. So
you
this
got
was like,
thrown
hey,
right into it.
welcome to the facility, brother.
Oh my God, man. I have to tell you, first off, this is spot on things that can happen, but you are like a master storyteller because I'm listening to you, you get this, you get that. I'm like, all right, where's the crescendo? I'm ready. I'm ready to hear what actually happened here. So yeah, wow, that's massive. So, all right. So in the future, like what did you guys do to you and your team to mitigate this type of thing? And like, what were the takeaways? What did you, or what could you do in the future to avoid something like this?
So first thing, we added a lot of gauges. Lot Every single pipe in that room got a gauge on it. Um, but and again, I don't want to even take away because my boss at the time, who had been in the building for 10 years, lucky enough, had even known about these locations. The thing is, it really takes somebody to say, we have to organize this, we have to strategize this, we have to really get into this system. And God bless him, he was always a customer first based, tenant based type of facility manager, wonderful at his position. But we had so many incubator companies in the building, I think 20 at the time pre COVID. And he was just constantly getting called up from different receptionists or front end people and just always trying to make the customer happy and totally knocked it out of the park. You would never see somebody with a bigger Google review than this guy, but he never really got the time to kind of get into the meat and potatoes of the building and really map out these systems. So after this fiasco, actually, I basically got handed the task of just owning it. And it's not exactly apples to apples, residential irrigation versus commercialized sprinkler systems. But he knew that I had an understanding of water and how water works and how pipes are going to flow and lowest, head on the line. That's where it's all going to collect. And he handed me the task of just, hey, every sprinkler head in this building, what's feeding it? Where does it come from? And I spent, you know, at least probably 6 weeks just going throughout the building and saying, all right, so clearly you can see the petition. This wall is made of brick. And when I take 3 steps, suddenly everything's drywall. So now I've entered a different part of the building. Even though I'm in the same tenant space, they would never know. But you just have to pay attention to those things. We've gone from 1800s brick to 2000s drywall. So this sprinkler head here on my right shoulder might come from A building. The sprinkler on my right might come from B building. And then it's just a matter of just doing some repairs. You do your annual sprinkler test. You put your theories to test. You constantly have everything on standby, wet vac, shop, evac, wet vacs, anything extraction equipment, just in case you do run into that scenario. But you just go and you just make your notes. And then eventually you just come up with the master PDF of just you have every level of the building, the bird's eye view, and where all the shutoffs are individually, and then where the main feeds are in the building. But that had to be somebody just owning it. And, I was working with them at the time, making all of our HR people happy and all the receptionists and, getting the pat on the head. Hey, thanks for coming to help us out with this smell or whatever. But we really had to just say, hey, stop all the other noise. This is the priority. This cannot happen again. And afterwards, I don't think we had a major issue in that building, the 4 years I worked there. And it was just because, hey, all right, we're right here in the middle of the building. Could be F, but if you notice, you walk 15 steps over that way, suddenly everything changes. Why don't we just drain this building just to be safe? It's just
Hmm.
trial and error, you know? And even that tenant that we put them in a swimming pool, we had it back up and running by Monday, all clove base off, drilled their holes for them, dehumidifiers and blowers going. And by Monday morning at 8 a.m., you never even would have known that you could have been getting a tan on it.
Hey, rock stars. If you're tuning into the podcast and are feeling overwhelmed by all the maintenance demands at your facility, don't stress. We've got you covered. Our sponsor, Coludis, is your go-to partner to help you tackle all those demands and get them done right, on time, and with top-notch quality. From project planning to execution, Coludis is there to make hard work easy. Visit coludis.com today to get started. I really like the fact that you mentioned ownership more than 2 or 3 times. So a couple things, right? Your current manager, thank you for walking us through that, by the way. It makes total sense. And your manager had the faith and the insight to see, all right, this guy has water flow experience. He understands how these systems work. It may be in a different setting, albeit, but and then the fact that you just, you have to own it. And that's and it sounds like you did just that. So thanks for sharing your story with us, Derek. It's great.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the name of the game, brother. Is just who owns this? Who owns this system, And then obviously, once you get a good grasp on it, you'll cross train your teammates. You can, share some insight with the manager again. But eventually somebody's just got to plant the flag and say, this is mine.
Mm-hmm. Well said. So shift slightly. What do you love most about, a facility's role and why?
Earlier, I spoke about those wins.
Mhm.
Those wins are nice. Those wins are really nice, brother. When you get a win, when you walk out of a headache and it's buttoned up and it's patched up and people are smiling and patting you on the back and thanking you, that is a great feeling. I mean, I certainly am a child that was loved enough. I don't want to talk about like I wasn't a child that got the recognition he needed. I was certainly recognized, but when you go into, and again, I'm going to bring up the building 215. Oh, you're in 215. That's a tough building. That's an old building. That's a weird building. I've always been of the mindset, I love the challenge. And if it's going to drive somebody else crazy, they'd rather a new building with no problem. I want the challenge. I want the headaches because I feel like there's just, even though with lower floors, you get higher ceilings. So yeah, you go in and a new buildings have their own headaches, of course. So it's all new systems.
Mhm.
But you're maintaining, you got the manuals, everything's been labeled with the label maker. There's no guessing. You're keeping the ship running, Versus what we were doing is we were trying to take things that were just completely out of date or just been chopped over the years and actually bringing them into the 21st century. And in doing so, making permanent solutions. We were getting rid of the duct tape and the bubble gum, and we were trying to weld things shut.
Mhm.
And in doing so, you got rid of so much headaches just for preventable maintenance. And when the boss or the building owner is like, oh, we're never going to have to deal with that again just because Derek handled it, that's a great feeling. Just like,
Mhm.
annual sprinkler test, or annual filter change, annual, shutdown, like, and people are dreading it, but you can do your part to mainstream that process. And now it's just never going to be as painful. And they
Mhm.
recognize you're the guy that made that happen. And that's even on the high level, but even on the low level, if a receptionist, the CEO, it's once a month, he has this call and they're always doing construction outside. And you go out on the street, you talk to the construction crew and you're like, hey guys, can we just take coffee for 20 minutes? I just need 20 minutes, please. And suddenly his phone call goes off without a hitch. And now you're the receptionist hero. Um, I mean, if you want to, can we get a little personal, Jay?
You can do what you want, Derek. Bring
All
it.
right. I get a call. We have a gym as one of our tenants in the building, Cambridge Athletic Club. And I get a call from the general manager, Carla. And Carla says one of my members dropped her phone in the treadmill, got sucked up by the belt, and we have no idea how to get it. So 5 minutes later, I'm in CAC, and I got this treadmill taken apart, and I find this woman's phone, hand it back to her. She's psyched. The general manager's psyched. Put it all back together like it never happened. And a month later, that same general manager asked me out for drinks. And then 10 years later, I'm married to that general manager with 3 beautiful children. So it just goes to show you that a job well done can really pay off with the dividends, brother. And
That's great.
that's what I
Oh, wow.
love
I
about
love that.
facilities.
Bring it back a few minutes here. Like that's awesome, by the way. That's a great story. Um, you have a thirst for solving these types of things, right? Like you talked about ownership. Now I asked you what you loved. You love the challenge. Someone sees a building that's broken with bubble gum and you say, hey, I got this, and that's really fundamentally with when facilities management is defined, it's really like, can you perform in a situation like that? Because not everything's easy and it's certainly not a straight line. So that's great. So I bet you're glad that phone got stuck in the treadmill, huh?
Best thing that ever happened to me.
Um, So Derek, and you might have touched on a little bit of this here, but like if someone, I'm going to ask you now, right? Like what advice, or if a listener was going to ask you right now, what advice would you give someone in a similar role?
I'm going to break it up into 2 parts, if that's all right. I'm going to
Of course
talk
it is.
to the kid that's 18, 19, starting off in facilities for the first time. And
Hmm.
I'm going to talk to the guy that's 34 years old that's helping out the 19-year-old, because I've been both now. And for
Got it.
the 18, 19-year-old, I'll just say, just get ready to lose, brother. If you can learn to lose, if you can love to lose, you have nothing to lose. I think a lot of people need that instant gratification, or, I don't want to say don't like to get their hands dirty, but just don't really want to dig deep or be put in a position to possibly not succeed. But if you can just look at that glass half empty and realize this is going to stink, but I know I'm going to get something out of this, the world is your oyster.
Yeah.
There is endless opportunity to win. There's endless opportunities to grow. If you can learn to lose sometimes, then you have no issue with losing. And you're not afraid to put yourself in positions that have that risk reward. And, with comes the risk, comes the reward. For the 34-year-old, I would say just try to remember being that 18, 19-year-old kid,
Mm.
because you've been there for 10 years or 15 years and you know the ins and outs and all the tricks and, the secret combination you have to hit on the door to get it to open. You have all that information. Um, but the younger gentleman might not. But if you can be patient and really care and really put that time into them, the dividends that will pay and how much that will make your life easier, having a teammate, a coworker that you can trust to that capacity, like, oh, that's my guy. I've been on him for 3 years now. I can take a week off vacation and not even worrying about the building. That's, I think, a big game is I think a lot of these, I don't want, God forbid, I don't want to get the old timers on. Maybe you know what I mean? But I think some of the old timers can get a little particular. It's my way or the highway, and this is it, and this is the end all be all. And those guys also don't take vacations because they can. And they also miss their kids' sports games because they have to. I think you just need to be able to put your faith into somebody else. And if you have the right person and you see them as the right person, just teaching them to grow and get better. And that's only going to make your life easier. And if your life is easier, their life gets easier. And then you just have a healthy cycle going.
That is phenomenal. Like, that's not facilities advice, in my opinion. That's just great life advice you just gave. So yeah, yeah. Very well said, Derek. Very well said.
I hope it applies in the emergency room for the serious. Haven't been there yet, but I'm just, this is what I know, brother.
So let me like another shift here, but you opened the door to, you said, can I get a little personal? And that was a great story. So we just learned a ton about the situations you've been through, your mindset, how you attack these things, how you solve, and you love challenges. How about a little bit about you, right? What do you do when you're not solving these challenges? Who is Derek Bettencourt?
Derek Bencar, man, he's a tricky guy.
Well, I know he's wearing a seaside jiu-jitsu, and anybody watching on YouTube knows that. So I'm guessing you like martial arts.
Love it. So that's actually, and honestly, too, we can actually bring it back to facilities, go figure. But I was always the technician, right? I was always the guy carrying the shingles up the ladder, or carrying the filters up to the roof, digging the ditch switch out. So I've always was a very physical employee. And in doing so, I was always in great shape. I still, even when I was younger, I went to the gym as well. I was an animal. But then, you meet your Italian wife who loves to cook, and suddenly the pounds start trickling on. And then you get promoted, and suddenly you're not the guy climbing the ladder. You're the guy telling the guy to climb the ladder, and the pounds keep added on. And actually, coming out of COVID, I think was really the breaking point, because COVID, we're all inside, nobody's outside working as much or exercising. And I got all the way up to 302 pounds was the heaviest I was on the scale. Where my entire life, I was normally walking around that 200, 215. So we're talking an 85-pound gain.
Mm.
And it, completely transformed my life. Stairs were becoming difficult. Tying my shoes was a headache. But I had small kids. My daughter at the time was 4 or 5. My first son had just been born. And I just knew, I said, this isn't going to be a longevity thing. We have to do something about this right now. So I started getting back into the gym. But it was a slow process. And that just never really held my attention. Same thing. All right, do this set on Monday, do this on Tuesday. All right, next week, back to Monday. It was just becoming a little mundane. And I was always a huge UFC fan, mixed martial arts.
Mhm.
And my wife said, hey, there's a local place 15 minutes down the road. Why don't you give it a try? These guys are all in great shape. You love it. Why don't you see what it's about? And I walked in January 3rd, 2022, and it completely changed my life for the better.
Mm.
I started training at the time, maybe 4 or 5 days a week. That slowly trickled down to 3 or 4, just because we just can't get in cage fights 4 or 5 times a week. But I started training martial arts every single day. And eventually, about 6 months in, I was working in corporate America. So nobody on the Zoom wanted to see me with black eyes and a busted up nose. And I was like, we got to figure out a way to make this work with the personal life and with corporate, Derek. So what I decided to do was I actually took a step back from mixed martial arts, which is full like UFC, and I
Mhm.
just strictly started training jujitsu. Now, jujitsu is dangerous in itself. When you're competing, you don't know what you're doing. But Monday through Friday, for the most part, you can put yourself in a situation to be safe, where you're going home to the family at the end of the day, maybe a few bumps and bruises, but nothing you can't overcome. And in those almost 4 years now that I've been training, I've lost 60 of the 85 pounds I've put back on.
Good for you,
So
man.
it completely turned my life around. I've made dozens of friends doing it. I've traveled all over the country now for competitions, made friends in all parts of the world. When me and my wife went to Sicily on our honeymoon, I trained jujitsu with some people in Sicily. When we went away last year for our baby moon in Norway, I trained with some Vikings in Norway doing jujitsu. And it's this funny thing where, yeah, we're not speaking the same language until we're on the jujitsu mat. And now suddenly we're speaking the same language, and it's just another tool that's really helped me build bonds and connections with people. I just, you haven't figured it out by now. I'm a little personal and I kind of like people. So
Yeah.
it was almost like learning a new language, and you can go anywhere in the world now. And you do this thing jujitsu? I do this thing jujitsu. And it gives you that commonality of, hey, you're going to try to break my arm. I'm going to try to break your arm. But afterwards, we're going to slap hands and go have a beer after. So let's just get after it. And, between the fitness aspect of it, the camaraderie of it, it really did a great number on my mental health, my emotional health, my physical health. And I even have my kids doing it now. My daughter's been training for almost 3 years, and my son's been doing it the last 6 months. So now it's a fun family thing to do too, where, if my daughter gives me any lip, suddenly she's getting put in a rear naked choke.
Oh, that's great, man. I mean, mentally, physically, the family aspect is just, thanks for sharing that with us. And to your point of like who you are, I've known you for what, maybe 3, 4, 5 weeks now. That's about it. But I feel like I've known you a whole hell of a lot longer because you're very approachable. You're a great guy. So yeah, it's good
Plus, I
stuff.
don't stop talking either, so you're gonna get an earful every time.
Well, let me ask you this. I'm sure there's always going to be questions after the show, right? So if people have questions about any of the topics you just, including jujitsu, that they wanted to ask you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Definitely, you can find me on LinkedIn, Derek Bettencourt. I believe that's how you found me, Jane, how we networked. And I'm also on Instagram, actually, as Brick Wall Bettencourt. And that's where I tend to do most of my fun jujitsu. You'll see me doing some competition highlights of, putting somebody to sleep, unfortunately. Or you'll see me doing a fun, wacky video with my kids where they suddenly don't feel like taking out the trash. And now the whole household is upside down, and this has got to get sorted out. So please feel free to find me on Instagram at Brickwall Bettencourt. But for anything facilities related, I'm on LinkedIn. And, obviously some things can get lost in the minutia sometimes, but always love meeting new people, love networking. For any reason whatsoever, please feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Derek, thank you so much for investing your time and, coming on the show and sharing everything with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Jay. It's always a pleasure to be able to speak with you, brother.
Absolutely. Right back at you. And for everyone listening, I hope you learned something. If you laughed, feel free to reach out to Derek. Follow us on any pod channel you follow. Yeah, you can find us there. Thanks again, Derek. And this was another great episode. So we'll see you next time.
It's a wrap. Another episode of Facility Rockstars is in the books. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Colutus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Until next time, facilitate and rock on.